The Hollow Republic. President Obama must surely wish he could undo the campaign speech he delivered in Roanoke, Virginia on July 13th. That was where he offered up the view that if you've got a business, you didn't build that, somebody else made that happen. It is a line that could haunt him right to November, revealing as it does an unwillingness to credit success and a hostility toward the culture of entrepreneurship. But the remark came in the context of a broader argument that was just as telling on a different point and no less troubling. After laying out his plans to raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans, the president said this to his audience, quote, "You know, there are a lot of wealthy, successful Americans who agree with me because they want to give something back. They know they didn't look. If you've been successful, you didn't get there on your own. You didn't get there on your own. I'm just always struck by people who think, well, it must be because I was just so smart. There are a lot of smart people out there. It must be because I worked harder than everybody else. Let me tell you something, there are a whole bunch of hardworking people out there. If you were successful, somebody along the line gave you some help. There was a great teacher somewhere in your life. Somebody helped to create this unbelievable American system that we have allowed you to thrive in. Somebody invested in roads and bridges. If you've got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. The internet didn't get invented on its own. Government research created the internet so that all the companies could make money off the internet." This is a remarkable window into the president's thinking, and it shows us not only a man chilly towards the potential of individual initiative, and not only a man deluded about the nature of his opponents and their views, but also, and perhaps most important, a man with a staggeringly thin idea of common action in American life. The president simply equates doing things together with doing things through government. He sees citizen and the state and nothing in between, and thus sees every political question as nothing but a choice between radical individualism and a federal program. But most of life is lived somewhere between those two extremes, and American life in particular has given rise to unprecedented human flourishing because we have allowed the institutions that occupy the middle ground, the family, civil society, and private economy, to thrive in relative freedom. Obama's remarks in Virginia shed a bright light on his attitude toward that middle ground, and it is in that light a great deal of what his administration has done in this 3.5 years suddenly grows clearer and more coherent and even more disconcerting. Again and again, the administration has sought to hollow out the space between the individual and the state. Its approach to the private economy has involved pursuing consolidation in key industries, privileging a few major players that are to be treated essentially as public utilities, while locking out competition from smaller or newer firms. This both ensures the cooperation of the large players and makes the economy more manageable and orderly, and it leaves no one pursuing ends that are not the government's ends. This has been the essence of the administration's policies toward automakers, health insurers, banks, hospitals, and many others. It is an attitude that takes the wealth creation capacity of our economy for granted, treats the chaotic churning and endless combat of competing firms, which in fact is the source of that capacity, as a dangerous distraction from essential public goals, and considers the business world to be parasitic on society, benefiting from the infrastructure and resources provided by genuine common action of the state. Of course, the state's benevolence is made possible precisely by the nation's wealthiest citizens, but the president seems to see that as simply an appropriate degree of giving something back. His words and his administration's actions imply that he views the government as the only genuine tribune of public desires, and therefore seeks to harness the private economy to the purposes and goals of those in power. This intolerance of nonconformity is even more powerfully evident in the administration's attitude toward the institutions of civil society, especially religious institutions, involved in the crucial work of helping the needy and the vulnerable. In a number of instances, but most notably in the controversy surrounding the Department of Health and Human Services rule requiring religious employers to provide free abortive and contraceptive drugs to their employees under Obamacare, the administration has shown an appalling contempt for the basic right of religious institutions to pursue their ends in accordance with their convictions. It is important to recall just what the administration did in that instance. The HHS rule did not assert that people should have the freedom to use contraceptive or abortive drugs. It did not even say that the government facilitate people's access to these drugs, which it does today and has done for decades. Rather, the rule required that the Catholic Church and other religious entities should facilitate people's access to contraceptive and abortive drugs. It aimed to turn the institutions of civil society into active agents of the government's ends, even in violation of their fundamental religious convictions. The rule implicitly asserted that our nation will not tolerate an institution that is unwilling to actively ratify the views of those in power, that we will not let it be and find other ways to put those views into effect, even though other ways may exist, but will compel it to participate in the enactment of the ends chosen by our elected officials. This is an extraordinarily radical assertion of government power and a failure of even basic toleration. It is, again, an attempt to turn private mediating institutions into public utilities contracted to execute government ends. When the pressed to defend its constriction of the rights of religious institutions, the administration recast the basic definition and purpose of such institutions. The final HHS rule defined a religious employer exceedingly narrowly as an institution that primarily serves and employs people of its own faith and has its basic purpose the inculcation of belief. This leaves no room for most religiously based institutions of civil society, no room for hospitals, schools, and universities, for soup kitchens and homeless shelters, for adoption agencies and legal aid clinics. Religious institutions may preach to the choir, but otherwise they may not play any role in society, especially when they disagree with those in power. They must be cleared out of the space between the individual and the state. To ignore what stands between the state and the citizen, to bring explicit technical knowledge to bear on private enterprise and civil society is very often an obstacle put in the way by the icy, snow-cold hand of the Obama administration. America's bewildering array of effective, fundamental philosophical distinctions between tyranny and freedom show that some of the practices of the Obama administration, especially in regards to the branch of civil society, is unjust. And for this certainly understandable understatement, we should take him out in 2012 because we can do better.